we're talking about a tale of two selves. You ever notice how two different versions of you are running your life and they don't even agree? See, one of them is living in the moment. The other one is editing the highlight reel. And the crazy part, the one editing the highlight reel usually wins. See, this is what Daniel Kahneman calls the tale of two selves in Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And if you don't understand this, you will make bad decisions in sales, leadership, and life. So let's break it down. See, there are two versions of you. There's the experiencing self, the one living in real time, and the remembering self, the one telling the story afterward. The experiencing self answers, how do I feel right now? The remembering self answers, how was it overall? And those are not the same question. Let me prove it to you. See, Kahneman studied patients undergoing colonoscopies. Real pleasant topic, I know. Patients rated their pain every 60 seconds during the procedure. That's the experiencing self reporting. Afterwards, they rated how painful the entire experience was. That's the remembering self. Here's what they found. The remembering self didn't care about the total amount of pain. It cared about two things: the peak moment of pain and the ending. This is called the peak end rule. In fact, in one experiment, the procedure was slightly extended, but made the final few minutes a lot less painful. So the total pain increased, but patients rated it less painful overall. So let that sink in. More total suffering, but a better memory of it. Why? Because the remembering self only remembers the peak and the end. This is Jedi level insight for sales. Most reps obsess over the entire presentation. What really matters? The emotional peak and how you close the interaction. Your ending writes the memory. You don't sell the experience. You sell the story they'll tell about the experience. Here's another one. Participants submerge their hands in painfully cold water. So condition A was 60 seconds of freezing water. Condition B was the same 60 seconds of freezing water plus 30 additional seconds where the water was slightly warmer but still uncomfortable. Which one do you think people preferred to repeat? They chose condition B, the longer one, the objectively worse one. Why? Because it ended better. So their remembering self overruled the math. This is irrational if you measure total comfort, because the first 60 seconds are the same. It's an additional 30 seconds of uncomfortability, but it's perfectly rational if you understand memory. Now think about this in leadership. If you run a meeting that's tense for 50 minutes, but you land it with clarity, empowerment, and momentum, guess what people remember? The ending. Not the middle ground. You can rewrite the entire perception of the interaction. Kahneman also talks about vacations. So if you go on a 10-day vacation and feel joy moment to moment, but it ends with a miserable airport meltdown or you break your ankle on the last day, how do you remember the trip? Ruined. Meanwhile, a shorter trip with a magical ending feels legendary. The experiencing self lives the moments. The remembering self writes the biography. And here's the kicker. The remembering self is the one making future decisions. The remembering self decides, would I do that again? Would I buy from that person again? Was that worth it? Your buyer isn't making decisions based on how they feel during every slide. They're making decisions based on the story they'll tell themselves afterwards. And if you don't control that story, then they will. Here's some deeper insight. Humans suffer from something called duration neglect. We ignore how long something lasted. We overweight the peak and the ending. This explains why people stay in toxic jobs because it wasn't all that bad, why relationships are remembered as amazing despite months of tension, why sales calls get labeled as great or terrible based on the last 3 minutes. The buyer's brain is not adding up the math. It's writing a movie review, and that review determines behavior. Let's make this practical. You have two jobs in any interaction: engineer the peak, engineer the ending. The peak is the emotional clarity, the moment they say, oh, I didn't see it that way. That's the reframe. That's the gap exposure. That's the challenger moment. That's the slay the frame moment. The ending is certainty, not pressure. It's clarity. It's based on what you told me, this is the move. If you let the call fade out awkwardly, you just rewrote the whole experience as mediocre, even if 90% of it was brilliant. Remember, the remembering self is brutal. It compresses 60 minutes into 2 emotional snapshots, peak and end. I know what you're thinking. So, are you saying the middle doesn't matter? No. The middle builds the peak, but it doesn't define the memory. You're also probably thinking, I don't want to manipulate people. Good. This isn't manipulation. It's understanding how humans process reality. You're thinking, if this is true, why do some long, painful processes still feel worth it? Because they end with meaning. Graduations, marathons, building a company. Painful in the middle, powerful at the end. And the remembering self loves meaning. Here's where this gets philosophical. Kahneman argues something uncomfortable. The experiencing self might actually be happier, but the remembering self makes the decisions. Which one should rule your life? If you optimize only for experience, you chase pleasure. If you optimize only for memory, you chase narrative. The art is alignment. In sales, that means deliver real value in the moment and help them frame it properly at the end. In leadership, run hard meetings, but land them with vision. In life, don't let one bad ending ruin a good chapter. You are not your last 5 minutes, but your brain might think you are. Most people are losing deals in the last 3 minutes. Most leaders are losing trust in the last 5 words. Most marriages get defined by the last fight. The remembering self is writing headlines. Make sure you give it something powerful to print. Because at the end of the day, people don't live by spreadsheet. They live by stories. And if you understand the tale of two selves, you slay the memory and slay the outcome.